Right, good morning and welcome to another stream session. Um, in this session, my goal is to implement our pickup system and get that working. And depending on how well that goes, we may progress on to the next step. Um, if you watched yesterday's stream, we ran into a snag. Uh, no matter what I did, I just could not figure out what I did wrong. We were in the process of consolidating the inventory item properties and variables into a single class, and that wound up breaking some stuff because of the way it was set up. Ultimately, I went off stream. I worked late to figure it out, and let's see here. Looks like we might be locked up here. Oh no. Okay, it just wasn't getting any active input. I thought we were locked up. I was like, wait a minute, maybe I didn't fix it. But yeah, our inventory system is respawning items again, as you can see. You got items spawning on the countertop there in the scene, game scene. Yeah, and the other thing I did was I mapped out the I key to pop up our inventory screen that we had to work, and hit I again to toggle it off. I don't know. Very simple. Toggle on. And the beauty of it is you can still move. The way we're going to set this up is the player can still be moving and running around while viewing the inventory. So if you just want to quickly see what you have, maybe drag and drop some things. What I will need to do is change the mouse so that it doesn't respond to what's behind it. Basically, I want the overlay to receive all the mouse input. So what I'll wind up doing, the quick fix for that, it might be a Unity specific thing to say, hey, this object's in the front. I want it to get all the mouse input, but a lot of times we may not want that. So we want to be able to control it at times in the game. So what I'll do is I'll set up a Boolean, which I already have one, and we may be able to use it depending on where it's located. Basically a Boolean to indicate that the inventory screen is up, and then it will stop receiving the mouse input. So you can still continue to run straight if you wanted to, or it can stop. Eventually I'll get the left and right strafe working with the other keys, but so anyway, so we've got that working. So let's stop this. And so we were working on this inventory item here, if you can see. Expand that out. So what I wound up doing, I essentially did what I was going to do last time. I moved all this stuff out, so there's nothing wrong with that. And I moved this function. Well, actually I had to create this function. I don't know if I had this during the stream, but the problem that I identified was going back to our, let's see what file this is. It's inventory manager. That's okay. Inventory item attributes. If we look at that, above these two variables here, the lifetime and start time, we originally had some variables that were public, which were the ones here: the item name, category, action value, stackable, multi-use, use value, and then we're going to add sprite. Well, that's what prompted me to realize we had duplicated this information, and so I want to keep it contained in the inventory item class. So as we add additional properties or methods or things that an inventory item should have, we would add it here in one place. But in the process, by removing those were set as public. And so the way I originally had it set up with the inventory was if you clicked on each item, down here in the inventory item attributes script, you would have public variables that set the category specifically, which is the most important. and then the other values. The reason the category is important is as it's going through through the spawning system, it matches by category. When it needs to find an item. So if we don't have that, a value set, and actually because I couldn't set it once I removed it out of here, the value actually became null, and it wound up causing some errors because the null or an empty value would try to do all items, and all items would cause it to lock up. So I changed that to the keyword all. There was an issue with using null as a default value to represent anything. It didn't like that very well. So anyways, that's what kind of caused the initial problem. The way I went around that, because apparently I tried to do a nested class and create an instance of that class in the inventory item attributes, like the inventory item in here, and try to expose it in the inspector so I could reset those values here. But I just could not get it to work on a multi-level like that. It could do it if the class was not using properties, which is the proper way to create properties is a get and a getter and a setter, or a get and set for each property. So and keep the internals private and expose public properties that way to get or set values on the internal variables. So anyways, I could not find anything in the documentation, anything that showed that you can expose that kind of stuff. So I wound up not being able to do it that way. Instead, what I wound up having to do, and so instead of setting it in the inspector, which I wouldn't want to have, as we had hundreds of items, I wouldn't want to have to go through clicking on each item to set these properties. It'd be convenient to do it all in one location. So it made sense to do that. And so in the inventory item script, if we jump to our inventory item script here. So we've got our private values, of course. These are all private. And we got our public property names, item name for this m_item name and so forth, all the way down here. Got a getter and a setter for each. And then I created this function here called set defaults for the item. And all it does is pass in a string name, which, and then based on that, the string name is actually going to be the name of the prefab, which I'm also keeping the same as the name of the item internally. So we just assign item name to item name, and then we do a switch statement, which is basically a selection based on the value of item name. And so if it's ammo box, then we just assign these public properties: category, action value, stackable, multi-use value, etc. Let's make sure I didn't miss. The sprite is the only thing I didn't do at that point. We have a variable set up for a sprite, which is going to be used to represent the prefab in the player inventory screen that pops up. That's done somewhere else, and I'll show you that. So yeah, I set up the switch, and it's category based. Item. It has a selection based on item name, and so I can specify the category of the item and all the values. And so to add another one, I would just drop a new item in the master inventory resource folder, the prefab, and then come in here and copy and paste essentially one block, the last block of code, change the case value here that's checked into the name of the prefab, and then assign these values all right here. And so it makes it real convenient to do this. Now later on, when we get into a database-driven inventory system, we won't be doing this stuff like this, because it'll pull through, it'll be looping through the items in the database and automatically building an array of these items. And so, and well, basically, we won't. We probably will not load the items into memory. Um, it'll be pulled from the database, depending on performance issues. I mean, we might want to preload, but if we had like thousands and thousands of items, I don't know if I necessarily want to have all those items in memory, unless the web server that this was running on, the server, had a massive amount of RAM and could easily hold, thousands of items of inventory. Because they're not taking up that much, really. I'm sure it's not that much. A couple of K per item. So 1,000 items, if they were 2K a piece, that's, 2,000 K, that's really not, 2 million. Yeah, it's really not that much. It's very minimal. So anyways, that's what we've set up, and that corrected the issue because this set defaults for item is called in. Let's go to the inventory manager. And see, the first thing as part of the inventory manager is it loads all the prefab inventory into memory. So we are loading it right onto memory from our prefabs master inventory file. And if the count's greater than 0, then it goes through this loop. It creates the inventory item details. Gets that component off the prefab, which is our class for the inventory item, and then it makes sure it's not a null object, and then it assigns, calls item details that set defaults for this item, and it passes in the prefab name in our loop using I as the index. So we added that additional statement which sets the values up properly. And then I do a quick, this is another thing I added here, just a quick check, because during the debugging process yesterday evening, I had to figure out what was going on, and I eventually found out the category was never being set the other way that I was doing it when I had this somewhere else. So so I do a check. If it's null, then I'll log this so that I at least have an entry in the console log. Otherwise, it set all the defaults. It has the item in the list, and well, it adds it down here. And so then the last thing we do is we get our sprite name. It's going to be mapped for that, and then we do a sprite resources.load, which is the simplest way to do it. As long as you know the file path, you don't have to have the item set up. You just put it in your resources folder, and I move the sprites folder to the resources, and so it's directly off resources, and then it'll load it, and we get some sprite data there, and so it's added to the sprite member variable, and then we add that to our master inventory list. So the sprite is actually should be accessible and ready to use, and it's with that object. So when we're mapping this stuff out, we'll have it. Anyway, so the next thing we're going to work on now is the pickup part. So we have to start picking up items so we can somehow work this in where we're showing it in our player inventory screen that pops up. And so there's a couple of things in order to get even started on that. I made a little to-do list here of things I knew that needed to be done. One, we need to create a player inventory array that will hold player inventory items and persist those items, because we don't want to have to reload what's in the inventory every single time. So, like rebuild, we could have like a simple little index with just a list of the item names along with a two-dimensional array. We talked about this before, that had the items and what they were. We actually could do that. Let's see if we're we would have to change change our master inventory. To keep it simple, we change it to a public, so that, you know, anytime we got a reference to the inventory manager component in our game, we could access the master inventory list directly to get those items. The other thing we can do is just, and we might do this, is create a function. Keep it private, but create a function here, a public function, that will retrieve an item out of the master inventory based on the name of the item. And so that'll make sure, and then it can retrieve, since all the information is being stored, we build that master inventory on startup. We could then keep a simple array, two-dimensional array for the player inventory that's tracked inside the script that actually draws the, that we're going to attach to the UI for the player inventory. And so we could just have a simple script that had a list of the item names, the inventory item names, and just a count, really, is the only thing that we would need to track, is the actual count of that item. So if it was a stackable item, you know, how many do we have? So our pickup system would work with that. It would check if it's a stackable item. It would look for that item in the array to see if it's already there, and if so, it would just update the stack count for that item. If it's not a stackable item, and of course if it's not in there, it would add it as a new one, set the stack count to 1. And then if it was not a stackable item, it would just add it to the array in a free spot. And then we'd have to add some logic that if our backpack was full, it would pop up a message saying no room in backpack. So we'll have to come up with a, I guess, some kind of notification system somewhere on the screen. You know, I don't want to have it like right in front of the user, but maybe we'll have it like show up right in the middle of the screen, and we'll set it where, you know, create a script that has an automatic dismissal time on it. You know, like we could send out a message and show it on the screen. It'll stay there for, you know, a couple of seconds and then disappear automatically destroy the, like a text UI element that just shows. That would probably be a really efficient and easy way to do it, and have it automatically remove itself from the UI. Now if we get a bunch of things going on, or we have to show a bunch of messages, we almost want to have like a scrollable message queue, you know, that goes to, for the player. So we make him come put something else, but maybe locate it somewhere else on the screen. I hadn't really decided that yet. We'll think about that. The main thing right now is we just want to get our pickup system working. We'll do checks to see if we can't do it. We'll log something to the console when we can't add an item, or you know, if the limits have been reached, and we'll look at figuring out how we're going to display that to the user later on. Okay, so first thing here, let's, we already said, I think we're going to go with keeping this private, and then we'll create a public function to expose that. So let's go down here to the end of the inventory manager, and we're going to create a public function to retrieve an item from the master inventory used during inventory. We'll just say this can be used anywhere in game at runtime once master inventory list array list has been populated. Okay, so our function is going to have a return type of inventory item. So inventory item is the return type. It's going to be a public. Let's put public before that. Public inventory item get item. Well, let's see. We already have a get item. Hold on. That's right. I knew I was going to need these. I may have already written this. Just make sure it's going to work for what we need. Yeah, I did a get item and a get items. Yeah, it matches string. Oh, perfect. So we already have it written right here. Returns master inventory item that matches the given name. And it checks if inventory item. Okay, we set it to no. I guess one thing I'm going to check here is if master inventory equals not equal to null. Then we'll do this. Yeah, we need to add that probably in the. Okay, that returns a single item. But I also created one called get items, which you could pass the category, and it'll just return you all the items in a list that for a certain category. So, for example, if there was a reason to just show weapons, like for example, yeah, I guess later on might it's going to be a useful function. I know somewhere. At some point, we're going to need to retrieve a list of the inventory items from the master inventory by a category and just show those somewhere or retrieve those for use. Maybe like in the build our buy sell trade market, which is player driven. Players can sell the items they have for gold, in this game, and we'll have a little market. And so they might want to just filter when they're either seeing items that they have for sale. They want to filter by certain ones, by category, or if they're looking for one. But it'll definitely come in handy. All right, so we already have this written, so we can delete this stuff down here because we already have those functions. End of. What is this? This is our main class, class inventory manager. Okay, let's look at our to-do list. Modify inventory item attribute script to allow each item each time to receive a despawn time during each item is what I meant to write. But yeah, that's done. So that's done. And then, oops, create a script that can be tested to all spawn location games to allow setting filter categories, spawn item frequency, and spawn. Yeah, we did all that. So our to-dos are done. Let's remove those to-dos. And so these are the helper functions that actually were written. The add item, which add item we no longer have. That's another change I made. I had, let's go back down here, and I'll also remove this code here that on start. The only thing we do is loading the prefab inventory. I double checked everything. None of this code was actually needed. It doesn't affect anything because we're now doing a we're spawning inventory based on a spawn location, and so we're not just spawning inventory or items everywhere in every spawn location across the map. It's still done that way, but it'll be done as spawn items are added to the map. It will automatically spawn those items based on their frequency, and that's all tied to the spawn location game object. Yeah, let's look down here at our load all prefab inventory. That's the only thing it's doing. So it's setting everything there, and yeah, I realized we didn't need it, but uh, adding the item here, it was kind of the way I was doing it before. The reason I had that add item function was because there were some external variables that were originally coming from the item uh, inventory item attribute script that was tied to the items, and so it almost needed to rather than duplicate the functionality, I had one common function and was passing it. But it seemed kind of silly to do that. What I did instead was create this set default items, sets the values. That way, it's much easier to understand what's going on, and it's easier to maintain that one method. And then we're just assigning the sprite and doing the direct add right here within this, kept it self-contained here in this load all prefab inventory. So with the exception of, well, yeah, because this other function that we're calling here is actually just part of the inventory item script. But we don't have to call anything else within this inventory manager script. This is pretty much it right here. Yeah, so we're able to eliminate some stuff, make it simpler. Okay, so we already have our get item, which is awesome. So now what we need to do is create this array that I'm referring to. Now we counted our number of slots we have on our player UI. And it's no longer here. You see I've taken it out of the mix here. It was called UI player inventory is what I called it. It's now a prefab. If you go to our prefabs folder, since it's not going to be a whole bunch of those, I left it right in the prefab folder there, not in a separate subfolder. Later on, if we get a bunch of them, we'll do that. Now, so I have it right here, and let's just drop it on there so we can see what that looks like again. And so we've got all these slots here. We get 16 here, and another 4. That makes 20 right here, and then 22, 24, 25, 26. So we have 26 slots total. So our array needs to be 26 elements. It's going to be a fixed array because it's a fixed backpack size or inventory size. There's no reason to constantly resize it and make it dynamic. With this small number of elements, it's going to be more optimized and efficient to have an array of fixed size. So, all right, so now what we need to do is add a script to this player inventory. Just want to make sure I didn't add any additional. And we're going to call it the player inventory manager. We got an inventory manager, which is a general for the master inventory. Then we have our player inventory manager. So let's add a component here. It'll be a new script. And it'll be the, I don't know if we should, since we're labeling our UI elements and grouping them with the UI before it, should I just specify UI player inventory manager. Let's just do that. Create and add it. Yeah, as I work with this more, I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with the scripting and doing all that. I'm starting to see better ways to do things, and that's why you'll see me go back and revise some code or combine things, or what makes it easier to maintain and manage down the road. That's what we're looking for, and everything that we're doing here. Eventually, on the next project, we'll be thinking that way from the start, and this was just kind of getting my feet wet on this. So, all right, so we've got that added. Let's go ahead and apply that change. do this, and then apply that change. So now if we look at our UI player, yeah, it does have the script. So let's go ahead and delete this out. We can just get access to the script from here. I don't want to have that extra. And then we'll edit the script. And, okay, the first thing it's going to have our array. So it'll be an array of inventory items. So inventory item. I like to use that. Some people do the M underscore for member. If it's a member of a class, a local item. I like to just do an underscore, indicate it's local versus not, and the ones that are public would just be the first letter is capitalized. So, but on this naming, let's do underscore. I guess we'll just keep it short, just inventory. Equals new. And this is going to be an array, so actually this needs to have brackets. And we did say it was going to be a fixed size, 26 items. New. Actually, I got the syntax on it. It'd be new inventory item, and then here we put the exact number of elements. So there we have it. We have 26 new elements. Now, I just want to document, based on our layout that we did before, for the player inventory, you know, we've got the first 5 . The first, well, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to do slot 0. 0 is going to be the secondary weapon. Slot 1 is going to be the primary weapon. Slot 2, and really the first 10 were going to be specific things. Well, really the first 6. The next quick slots were going to be, you know, the remaining 4 to make that 10 that are going to be kind of unique things. They're going to have special things. The other ones are just going to be storage. So there's not going to be any additional functionality there other than stacking items or not stacking them. But see, the quick slots need to be set up in a way that they're going to be mapped to a key in game, like, you know, if the user presses 1, that'll switch to the primary weapon. If they hit 2, that goes to the secondary, and so forth. And so in the quick slots, when you hit 3, 4, 5, or 6 to use those items, you know, we're going to build some functionality on those. So I want to make sure that they're labeled what they are. Okay, slot 2 is going to be, call it the primary weapon. Attachment, silencer. Slot 3. Attachment 1, we'll call this attachment 2. There's a scope. Four. And again, arrays are 0 base. That's why we're starting at slot 0. Slot 4 equals primary weapon attachment 3, which is going to be a laser sight. Just call it a laser. Optical laser. Slot 5, 4, 5. It's primary weapon attachment. This is going to be the 4, which is going to be the clip. And then slots 6 through 9, that's 6, 7, 8, 9, that's 4. Those are going to be quick slots. And those really don't matter. I mean, you could drag and drop first aid kits in number 3 or put it in 5, or you could have a gun or pistol or one of these other items in there. Like if you pick it up and you need to just store it there just to be able to carry it with you, you can do that, but you're not going to be able to use a primary and secondary weapon or any of the attachments in those slots. They have to be specifically set in these other slots in order for the ability, because the abilities, the functionality we're going to write is going to be tied to a slot, a script. There's going to be a script that runs with whatever item is in that slot, and then it's assumed that only a primary weapon, secondary, or attachment, so forth, is in those slots and to work. So anyway, initially we're going to be just making sure that only those type items go in those slots. Those are kind of reserved slots, let's put it that way, the first 6. 6 through 9 are quick slots. Really, any item can go there, but they're going to have special use in the game, whereas they're mapped to keys 3, 4, 5, and 6 to be able to use those items. And then the remaining slots, which will be slots 10 through 25, because it's one less because it's 0 based. That'll give us 26 items. Total slots 0 through 25 is 26 items. Those, we call them excess or the extra slots for we're just going to put any here. I can hold anything or any item. Same with the extra slots. And I'll just make a comment here. Stackable true, meaning these slots do allow stacking. Whereas the first 6, obviously secondary, primary, and the attachments, we're not going to be stacking them in there. If you have extra silencers and scopes and lasers and clips that are picked up, those are non-stackable items, so they're going to just go into either a quick slot or an extra slot and non-stackable. So if it's stackable equals true, meaning those slots are going to allow stackable items in them. And that's really just a note for myself. We know that basically starting with slots 6 and up, 6 to 25 allow stackable items, so that'll just be set that way. I don't think we need to actually get into setting it as an actual property of a class and write some code to do anything special with it. I'm trying to keep this simple and easy to understand here. All right, so we got it mapped out where the weapons are going and what items can go where. So now the actual pickup function, though, is not going to be in the player inventory manager. It's going to be in the player script, the third person user controller, which we're going to have to document all the code that we're adding here, things that I'm adding in there, because at some point I'm getting rid of that third-party user controller and the third-party character, those two scripts, along with the the model I'm using right now for the player, Ethan. That's the Unity basic one they provide for free from the asset store. I'm going to be switching to the more likely the Invector one. And unless we want to tackle the challenge of writing our own, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what kind of experience level we get by the end of this, how comfortable I feel with scripting in the code, and really getting. I might have to study what they've done. I mean, I know that there's different animations occur whether the player is grounded or not. So they have some code on how to what they are identifying as grounded or not, what the distance is. There's a ground distance check, and there's some other things. I mean, the animations are going to vary based on whether you're in the air or not. Are you crouching? Are you crawling? I almost want to do my own. If I can get I'd like to get a fully rigged model, and Unity has its own built-in animation system. Use the Mechanism animation system. So if I can get a fully rigged model, it has all the joints and things, and I would like to actually play around with that and do all my own animations in Unity here and work everything out myself. I mean, it's because, to be honest with you, I've looked at, as good as some of the ones that are out there, it doesn't have the feel that I'm looking for. It's definitely an improvement over the Unity Ethan free one, but it doesn't have the feel that I've had like in some of these AAA games. It's close, but it's not quite there. They give you everything, and then you got to tweak it, I guess, from there. But I almost want to, like I said, it'll be another lesson. If I feel inclined to develop my own, I will. All right. So we have the array set up, and it's fixed, and we've got it documented what it is. And so on this to-do list that I had, that was item 1. Create the player inventory array and the player inventory script, which is where we're at, the inventory manager. So we're here. I'm going to check that off. The second thing is create the pickup code. Now the pickup code is going to have to be able to add an item to this inventory item array, because this is what's storing the items. When we're not viewing the actual player inventory screen, they have to be stored somewhere to track them. And this is what the array is for. It's actually tracking and holding these items, and then this array will be used when we view the player inventory screen. It will load these items that are in this array to show them in that screen. So it serves a dual purpose. It's going to be used for, by the pickup side as well as the viewing side. And so so we're going to need a way to add an item, and I'd like to keep all the functionality tightly tied as much to the player inventory manager, and what makes sense to move out of here, I will. Like I said, when we start mapping, whatever letter we're going to use for pickup, which I think it'll probably be like P for pickup. We'll just do P. P for pickup. Keep it simple. When the user hits letter P, when they get to a zone, they interact with, because we're going to add colliders if we don't already have them. We're going to add like a pickup zone on these items. And we're not going to make the user get right up on the item. They can be within a reasonable distance of the item and be able to pick it up. Or, we're not going to get into, because otherwise there may be issues with some of the structures I'm using, the buildings, and I don't know how well that's going to be with colliders that need to be put in. It's going to be a lot of work to get something super, super, super precise. And right now we're just trying to build the scripting, the game code, and the management of side of it, and we can refine that later. So we're going to need a function to add an item to this inventory item. So array. So let's do this. Let's create that function right now. And I don't know if we're even going to use these two. We're going to leave these two functions. I don't, like I said, I don't know if we're going to need them or not yet. But we're going to have a public void add item. All right, so so we'll just pass in an inventory item object. So what that means is out there in the pickup code, when we decide which item which item we encounter, first of all, we'll be able to, during the collision of that, we're running into the zone, let's say the pickup zone, we'll obtain the name of the item that's out there, and then we'll use the get item function that we have in our inventory manager, the master inventory manager. We'll use that get item function to get a reference to the item, to return that back, and then from the pickup script, we'll then make a call to this add item in the player inventory manager and add that item to our list, and we'll remove it from the world. So that's the general overview, the high level overview of the process for pickup, where we need to make changes. So here, if we're passing in the entire inventory item, we won't have to be, again, just pass around that object, that inventory item object. So we don't need to worry about anything more than that. So and originally I was going to I was going to just have a we talked about having an array that just had the basic information, like the count and the name, not necessarily the entire inventory item object. But the more I think about it, and we may not need it right now, but if in the future down the road, we may add some functionality that actually requires an entire copy of that spawned in item. So it's good that we go ahead and just do it this way, where we're actually holding. It's only 26 inventory item objects, so it's not a whole lot of memory. But it's kind of overkill, because we could accomplish this, like I said, just by storing a string value in a reference count to the stack count, basic stack count value, and then when it comes time to render it, we can pull that information from the master inventory and all that. But we got to keep this in mind: the master inventory. If we ever make this a network-based game, again, this is one thing I'm thinking already. The master inventory is going to be on the server side, and so we need to build our own inventory objects on the client side, which is our computer, and not be pulling from that server side, as much as we need to. So very little. You want to minimize that, the amount of traffic going across the network, to keep it being a responsive game, very responsive. So anyway, I'm going to take a short break. I need to get a refill on my drink. I'll be right back, and we'll get started with the scripting. All right, so I'm back. Sorry about that. All right, so okay, so we're gonna finish this add item here. Essentially, all we're gonna do is add it to our, which we called it underscore inventory. So okay, now initially, here's the other thing. We're gonna need to decide what slot this item is going into, and so we're gonna have to do a little based on the type or the item name. Um, yeah, I'm also I just realized we don't have any way to track our stack count here. So we almost need, this is going to be what we call a two-dimensional array. Like that. I'm sorry, I think it's with a comma. Used to, I'm thinking the old days. There's our two-dimensional array. So we are, it's probably a good idea to initialize our arrays. Initialize. And we'll create a separate function for that, just so it's going to be a private void. I'm going to say for int c equals 0, semicolon, c is less than underscore inv dot length. Right, and then we'll say c actually a two-dimensional array. This needs to be 2. We have 26 elements, and then each of those elements will have um, two entries in it. The first entry will be the actual inventory object. The second entry will be the stack count. So, all right. So in slot 0, basically of the, that's going to equal. Initially, we're going to set it to null. This means nothing's there. Why is it complaining here? Okay, they've changed the way that works. They used to be able to, or used to have to reference it with the brackets, but I guess it was confusing. So inventory c comma 1. It's going to be 0. So this is the inventory item object. Stack count. Okay, so why is it complaining here? Oh, okay, I know what it is. Yeah. See, it's subtype inventory item, and so it doesn't understand what stack count is. It's if we're doing this is like a 26 by 2. They're all going to be inventory item objects. So what we're going to do is create a private class PI inventory, player inventory. Let's spell it out. I think we can use that because we haven't used that name. Okay, public class player inventory. Essentially what that's going to be is it'll consist of an inventory item, and I guess we can just call it member inventory, and then we're going to have an int stack count. And really that's what it is. And then this here will be, instead of inventory item, this can be player inventory. New. I don't really want to add the stack count to the master inventory, class we have because it's it really relates to the player inventory in the backpack, not the main inventory. So we've kind of in a way subclassed this. What kind of functionality do we have in inventory item? Just the set defaults for items. So yeah, we could. I guess really the proper way to do this. Player inventory is a subclass of inventory item, which would eliminate this line altogether because it automatically will have those fields, and then we'll have a might as well be consistent private in stack count, and then let's do a quick action. I created our public variable for stack count, so alright, so going back to our player inventory, yeah, it's just 26 elements now. We can get rid of this because what we're going to say is player inventory c dot now maybe we want to do it the other way because we can't really separate. We're passing in, that's right, we're passing in to this function. We're going to add an item. Let's see. Yeah, we'll kind of need to do it separate. So we don't necessarily want a subclass because what it does is it'll mesh in all the variables together. Essentially, player inventory becomes a single class. And, well, no, maybe not. Let's see. it's not going to be available. So we're going to change this. Forget this. And do that. But we're going to make this public here because it's just going to be easier to access. Okay, so player inventory C dot inventory. It's the actual inventory object equals null, and then dot stack count equals 0. So it's kind of what I was wanting to do there. Okay, so initially set the inventory item to null. That's on the initialized player inventory, which is called start. And then we got this public void. We're going to add an item, which will add it to here. Okay, so first we want to check is if underscore inventory is not equal to null, then we can do some stuff here. Then we're going to loop through each item. And so first we want to check if item exists. If so, and it's stackable, update the stack count. Otherwise, just add it as a new item. Okay, so we're going to first of all check to see if it exists. So we're going to have to loop through if let's do this. And we also want to create a bool b equals false. So we don't duplicate adding this item. We'll flip that flag because there may be some code we want to skip based on that. Okay, so if length greater than 0, I'm going to check to make sure we got items before we can waste time to do that. We're going to do that. Else just add it as a new item. All right, so the okay, so no, actually we don't want to, because I don't want to, I can already see some code being duplicated if I make that an else. What this will be is if b item added, if not added, then added. Because we have two circumstances. We can have this, we can have an item that's already in there that we got to search for, and it's stackable, so we're just going to update the stack count. We're not going to be adding a new item, so we'll flip that flag. But we also have the instance where, let's say we pick up another pistol. Well, it is already in the array, but we're not going to update the stack count in it. We're going to add as a new item. So it's not a stackable item. Therefore, the flag b item added will not be, the stack count won't be updated, and b item added will not be switched to true, and we will be adding it as a new item. So let's keep that code down here. That's going to be the same, regardless of whether it's a non-stackable or non-stackable item. If it's an item that needs to be added into a new slot, in either case, we can use the same code for that. So, but here we're going to then go through for int. Use I equals 0, semicolon. Well, I is less than. You use a looping a lot in applications in general. Anytime you're processing data, you're going to be using loops quite a bit. So get used to it. worthless. So that'll go through our items. And then, let's see. I'm wondering, just so we don't have null values here, and I'm sorry to get sidetracked here, but I was thinking as we're searching through this, I mean, the first item is, let's say there's an item there, it's not a null there, but we could run into a null if an item hasn't been put there yet, and we're not going to be able to check values here unless we're checking specifically in here, I guess, if it's null, which means an item's not there. Okay, well, let's just, since we have a fixed array, we should do that. Create a new, we won't have a null then. We're creating, it's empty. We're not assigning any values. It's not going to have, if we look here, all these are blank. We're not assigning any values anywhere other than when this function is called. But this is called externally from the class. So we should be okay. Alright, so let's go back here. I just feel better about that. Because that means our item name will be basically an empty string and blah, blah, blah. We can, because we're going to be comparing on that. I didn't want to have a null value in there and be able to check for empty. So anyways, we're going through our loop, checking our inventory length, getting the item, and we're going to compare if the item that we're passing in, item name, is equal to, if it's equal to the inventory item that we're currently at, gotta reference it by the index, item I dot inventory dot item name. Then if they're equal, then first of all, if they match, okay, that's fine. Well, now we want to see, okay, all right, is it a stackable item? And it's stackable. Then all we're going to do is underscore inventory I. We're going to stack count plus plus. And then we're going to say that the item was essentially added. We at least updated the stack count. Now we could, I'll tell you what, we're going to return back the value of this item added as a bool so it can be checked, and so we'll return that later. Let's go ahead and add it now so don't forget, item added. So we get some feedback from the function whether it was added or not. We might even implement a standardized return object that's basically a class of its own, and it has like where you can return. That's the way you can return multiple values. Is when you have like a struct, for example, you could have the result, success or not, a number to indicate the error code, and then a description field which would give more human readable description about what the error was, so you can return back that object once it's populated here as a result of these functions and get more specific details. Because right now there could be several reasons why we couldn't add an item. One, it could be the inventory is out of space. That could be one. Second thing is we could have like our first 6 primary and secondary attachments, the primary weapon, secondary, are not full, so our backpack's not necessarily full, but the regular quick slots and everything else is full, so we can't add an item for that reason. Or there might just be, maybe we had a logic error. I don't know. Something happened and never set it correctly, so it's saying it's false. But at least we get an indication and we can look into that. Alright, so since this is new code, I always like to put debug statements in here. We're going to say item added, in parentheses we'll put the item name, item name, by updating stack count. That's all we'll say. So we know it was updated by stack count versus being added into, a new. We might even want to show the slot number. Slot, we can do that. Slot plus basically I is going to be a slot number. One of, we're going to say 25, so that'll be a the 25 will remind me that it's 0 base, so that number would indicate, it's not actual, and we're looking at our game slots, and I'm counting them out. It's not going to be, if it was 1, for example, it's not going to be the very first. It's actually or if 0 shows up, I'll know that it's the first slot. But anyway, we won't just add that. Let's just leave it at that. We'll put the slot. Okay. This is to upper function. We're just going to capitalize the item name. Okay, so the items added. So skip this code here, and we'll just return back the item was added. Now, if it's not added, then we need to add it as a new. So now this is where it's going to get a little more complicated, actually, because now we need to say, okay, we're going to add it into our player inventory in a certain slot. But we need to check, we basically need to check, okay, is it a melee weapon? Basically a secondary weapon, secondary category? If it is, which is our bat, okay, is there a bat in our slot designated for the bat? So we need to be checking all that. So let me take another short break. Take a quick bathroom break, and I will be back in a little bit. But we're going to think about that, and we're going to figure out what we need to do here. So it's a couple of things. Let's just document what we need to do. One, we need to determine based on item category, which slot to place it in. That's our big question. Second thing is there enough free slots? Is there a free slot to add item? That really might be the first thing, really. Let's change that. But going through the checks, I guess, will probably determine that. So those are two things for sure. We're going to have to figure that out. So let me save that. Leave this code right here, just what we have here. You guys be thinking about that as well. But I will be back in just a bit. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, so first thing, two things we need to figure out here. Not necessarily the first thing because it may not be in that order, but based on item category, which slot to place it in. So we're going to check through. Really, we're going to check through based on the category and see if it can be put in one of the first 6 slots. Because then after that, after the quick slots and the extras, it can go in really any of those that are free. So we'll determine by the end of checking all those slots whether it was added or not. So, okay. So the first thing we're going to do is compare the categories. We're going to go through these. And unfortunately, the first 6, we're going to have to do a manual comparison. We can't really use a loop for that. We need to get the, okay, we need to get the, we could do a bunch of if statements. We're going to use a small switcher. We're going to switch, what's our item you passed? It's called item. What's that say here? Not all code paths return a value. Oh, sorry. I think I put this in the wrong. No, that was right. B item added, inventory not equal to null. Then no, that was in the right spot actually. I don't know why it was saying that. No, this is the one that. Okay, so we're gonna switch. It's gonna be item dot item name. Actually, no, category name, not item name. Because we did a search on item name up above, and if it hasn't been added, then we'll do the switch by item category. So case, and now the categories that are acceptable to go into our first 6 slots would be, first of all, let's start with our primary weapon. So it'll be weapon primary. Again, this is actually specifically, we have designated this up here. We said our primary weapon is 1. So I guess we can start, let's start with our secondary just to make it consistent. Secondary. Whoops. Weapon secondary. W-E-A-P-O-N. Weapon secondary. Slot 0 in array. Okay. And we're going to have an if statement. If our inventory slot 0 dot we could check by 2 things, but we could check the stack count because it's going to be 0 if nothing's there. Hopefully when we initialize, yeah, we set it to 0. It means nothing in there at that point. When we add an item, even if it's not a stackable item, we're going to increase that stack count to 1 just to show that there's one of those items there. But it's not going to be a stackable. But just to make it interesting, we want to check to see if inventory 0.m and therefore if the category that's currently assigned, the value that's there, is equal to, actually I was going to say weapon secondary, but it almost seems like it may be better to do an if statement than a switch because we're going to be doing some kind of redundant checks here. Yeah, we might just switch to. Sometimes we got to do what makes sense. Okay, so if inventory category so we don't want to necessarily check by the item name because um, as we add additional items for this category, like a secondary weapon, we have different items. We're just checking to see if a bat exists. Well, if we had a knife down the road or some other melee weapons, secondary weapons, it's not the logic's not going to be right. So we can't really check by the individual item. In order to determine if there's something here or not, we're just going to check the current category, which will tell us the category of the item that's currently in there, if any. If there's nothing's there, it'll be empty or blank. It'll be an empty category string. So, but if it's equal to weapon secondary, then we know that we already, because that's the only thing that could actually be allowed to be added to that slot, in slot 0, inventory 0. So well, I guess I just removed my switch, but now I understand why I had it to begin with. Because first of all, we need to determine what's the category of the item that we're trying to add. Because doing this check right here, it's not going to work. And then based on that category, then we see if it can be added to one or more slots in there. In this case, secondary weapon, we only have one primary slot that it could be added to that's specific. So we do need to have that switch after all. And I apologize. Okay, so we are going to switch. Actually, it's item dot the item category. In case the weapon we're trying to add is a weapon secondary category, it can go into slot 0 only, right? Is that what we said? Yeah. And then we're going to check. So if inventory, whatever. Okay, so we're checking. So now we want to check that slot. Inventory 0, that m underscore inventory, that category. If it's equal to weapon secondary, then that means we already have a secondary weapon in there. And so we want to say if it's not equal to weapon secondary, then we can add it. So then we'll add the item to the slot. So say inventory 0. That m inventory is equal to item and underscore inventory 0 dot. We got our stack count that we need to just set. I'm going to increase that by, we can do plus plus. I was going to say just set it to 1 because it's always going to be 1, but if for some reason our logic is wrong and we continue to add weapons on top of weapons, and they're not supposed to be stacked, the stack count will go up, and it will at least show that, reflect that in the player screen, and we can go look at the logic here. And then we're going to say b item added equal to done, we want to break. So that's for weapon secondary. And so we're going to do these specific checks based on the category of the item. It's really just these first 6 slots we need to worry about. After we do our specific checks to see, because we're trying to, we could have just set it where it adds it to the player inventory, the general quick slot or the other extra slots, and then force the player to move those items, drag and drop from there to equip them. But what this switch statement here is doing is implementing an auto equip on pickup. Let's state this code does an auto equip on pickup for weapons and attachments. So yeah, so that's what this code is really doing. If you're wondering what I'm doing with the switch statement. Now down here we'll have a thing, if not added, still try to add to a free slot in the QS or XS, which are the extra slots. And we're going to, if not, be item added. And so we'll do that code down here. That's going to be the final code. It's going to be the generic code for anything else after that that doesn't fit one of these specific things. Okay, now let's copy this case statement. And again, for the primary weapon, we have a very specific slot that it can go in. Now the primary, let's go back and look. We gotta check this. I think to get rid of that. What the heck do we have here? Do we have an extra? What is this here? First of all, that's our if statement, and then this dotted line is supposed to be our we start getting a lot of nested things like this. It's best to, especially when it scrolls down, I just like to put that. It's the to let me know that's what that is. That's if not be item added here. And this here is of course our main inventory is null. Did it get rid of that red? Yeah, I had an extra bracket. That's what was causing the issue. So let's save this code. Alright, so this will be the primary. So now we're going to check in slot, and I was going to check that again. What did we decide on this? Probably need to just carry this down for reference. And really just, maybe I can move it down here because this is really what matters. Okay, so anyways, our primary weapon goes in slot 1. So it's slot 1 only for the primary, weapon primary. So if inventory 1, that equals weapon primary, not equal to that. Basically mean it's empty, there's nothing. Then we want to add update the stack group, B item editor. So you see how this is going. So we'll copy this again. So for now, we only have one type of weapon, which is our pistol, and one type of secondary item. So we only have this one if check. But hold on one second. I got to break for just a second. All right, I just had a phone call I had to handle. Okay, so yeah, like I was saying, there's right now we only have in our master inventory, we literally only have one type of secondary weapon, one type of primary weapon. So I'm not doing an additional check to see, okay, you know, what kind of item is it? We just added in there. I guess it really don't matter anyways. It actually won't matter here because all of our even if we add additional secondary or primary weapons, they're only going in that one individual slot. Is the only custom slot they would go into, a specific slot. But they can also go in the other quick slots with the extra slots. But specifically, out of the first 6, these are the only slots they can go in. Now, attachments are going to be a little bit different. The category is going to be attachment, but you know, depending on the type of attachment, needs to go in a certain place. So that right there, now that I see that as far as attachments go, that can be an issue there because we do have 7, 8, 9, 10 specific for a certain type of attachment. So I'm already seeing that we need to go back to our inventory system, master inventory system, and change. We're going to have 4 attachment categories, basically. That's what it boils down to. Because our slot 7, I'm sorry, slot 2 was the primary weapon attachment 1, 2, 3, and 4, but it's a certain type of attachment. Silencer only, scope, laser, clip. You can't put a clip in the silencer thing or a laser in the scope. So we're going to have either attachment categories 1, 2, 3, 4, which would probably be just better to make it generic in case we do change the item type. But so the silencer, the category will be like attachment 1. Scopes, all scopes will be attachment 2. Attachment 3 would be lasers and different kinds of lasers, and we had different kinds of clips. They would just be in the category of attachment 4. So let's see if we can make that change now, because I really, otherwise I'll be doing some if checks for the actual name of the item and using hard-coded values that don't necessarily are going to stay that way. And let's do it right. Let's just change it right now. All right, so we go to our master inventory. And actually, that's right. That's right. See, I was getting ready to go the old way. I'd have to click on the item and then see the values here, but I forgot we changed that, which I like it better this way. It's in the should be the inventory manager. I kind of forgot where I put all this. No, I'm sorry. It's under the inventory. Was it the item? this inventory, yeah. The set defaults here. So, yeah, weapon secondary, primary is fine. Consumables are good. Ammo boxes, ammo for general, that's fine. So we're kind of looking at all these right now. Collectibles, may need to change these categories later on, but consumable. Okay, the attachment is what I'm concerned with. The mag, for a mag, it's going to be, and really that should be like mag 30, but it's not going to matter. Just general mag, because we're setting the values here, what the actual bullet capacity is here. All right, so the mag actually is slot 9, but it'll be attachment 4. Pistol, that's fine. The silencer was actually attachment 1. Let's double check that. Let's jump back here. Silencer attachment 1, clip 4. Yeah, so we've got that updated there. So that'll take care of that. Okay, that's the simplest change we needed to make. So you'll see what I'm getting at here. Because now when we do this, yeah, it's only a specific slot. Those types, category of items going. So this will be slot 2 only, and this will be attachment 1, which is basically our silencer. We need to update these two. So again, by us checking that category with an if statement, we are making sure that we're actually not stacking attachments by checking that. Same with the primary weapons. Okay, so let's copy that. So this will be attachment 2 goes in slot 3 only. Compare attachment 2. These are all 3s. So forth. So attachment 3 over here goes in slot 4 only. Last but not least, our last attachment 4, the last custom check here, goes in slot 5 only. Okay, so V item added will be set to true if it can successfully assign a pickup item of one of those categories in our in one of those slots in the array, which would be the ones that are primary, secondary, and the attachments. All right. So at this point, if the item is added, then we're just going to go through and loop through and just add the item. So we can copy. It's going to be code like this. Let's see, inventory.length greater than 0. Do all that. Again, we just want to, well, I kind of wasn't checking any of that. I guess because we are setting it to 26 elements up here. Player inventory right here. We know it's going to have a size to it, so we probably don't need to check this length. Let's remove that because that's actually just overkill. We're not going to want to do it again down here for this next one. Okay, so now, since it okay, so the first check was our stackable check. The item's already there, and it's stackable. Let's just increase the stack value. We added the item. Fine. If not, we're going to come down here. If it still hadn't been added, we're going to do this loop again. And as we're going through the quick slots, since we've already done our checks for the first 6 slots, we can really start at 6. Because we did 0 through 5, those are the first 6. We can start at 6 and then start here. And then we check item if item name. Wait a minute, let's think through this because we may not need to do this check again for stackable, because what we did in the first part here, we've already check if the item exists already in the player inventory. And so if it does and it's a stackable item, we're just going to stack it up. That's the first check we did. And actually the reality is we didn't have to start at 0. See, we're not adding a new item here at this point. All we're doing is seeing, okay, is it already in the inventory? If it is, let's increase the stack item and say it's been added. So really we could have started at 6 here. And really this code we had for checking this stuff should have been before the check for, okay, so the item already exists. So, because we might be able to combine this code. Yeah, let's change this. Because even if somebody already has, let's say they already have a gun or a primary weapon that they have in their quick slot or extra slot. Let's say they dropped the gun out of their primary. They just got rid of it. You know, they're out of ammo, so they just dropped the gun. They find another gun. We do want it to check those slots right away, the custom slots 0 through 5, and add to those slots first, and then go into what we call the overflow, the quick slots and the others. So let's remove this. Let's put this code in here inside the if statement. And let's just change this code. Let's pull this code out here, the switch statement. And let's put that as the first part here. Okay, so the first thing we're doing is doing the auto equip code for pickups on weapons and attachments. So we're just checking, okay, is this item category, is it a weapon secondary, a primary, is it an attachment 1, 2, 3, or 4? If so, let's go ahead and auto equip in those specific slots. Okay. Now, when it gets here, and we update B item added on each of those. So now if the item wasn't added, let's say check if item exists and can be stacked. So that's what this is doing here. It's checking item has been, okay. Now, and that can start at 6 now because we've already done the checks to see if it should go in 0 through 5. So yeah, that starts at 6. And then now the same thing here. So now if we still haven't added the item, if item still not added in player inventory, let's just try to add it to a free slot in QS or QXS areas, which start at 6. So essentially, at this point, we've already checked the stackable trait. We don't need to really check anything. We're checking for an empty slot. And we can check either if the item name is an empty field, or, but in this case, we're going to do like we did before. We're going to check for the category. If item.category, actually, we're just going to check if we're going to go through if that equal, if it's equal to string.empty. It's an empty category string. And I might need to just try to trim that. Use this function to make sure. Sometimes, since we initialize the array, I'm not sure how Unity is handling on this side, but I know in C#, if you have, well, it's not a fixed string, so it should be empty, but we're going to make sure. We're going to trim off any spaces just to make sure if it's stored, just some empty spaces in there. That's still an empty category. Okay, so if that's empty, it's equal to empty, then then we want to just add the item. We're not going to be doing this. We are going to do the stack count thing. But we also want to add the item there as well. See, above we didn't, all we're doing is, since we're doing stack count, change that to I. So we're assigning the item and then we're increasing the stack count. Let's just be for like trying to add item. Okay, so item added, blah blah blah, slot, whatever, I as a new item. Let's just say that, new item. So that'll log out to our console and we can check that. Now, sorry about that. I had the cat scratching on the door. I had one locked in the back there. I had to take care of her, bring her out. It's a mama that has a couple of baby kittens here, and she was trying to get to her baby kittens. All right, so we've got all this set up here with our attachments. And so we're going to have to put one of these debug lines on each of the case switch statements here. What we can do is after the switch, just say that basically if the item was added, then we'll say item added to custom slot I'll just say right here custom slot like that, and we'll have really won't know what slot it was added if we do that, but that's okay. Just say as a new item and be done. That can go on one line if we want like that, just to clean it up. All right, so we essentially have our thing now. So that's our function there. I mean, that's seems like we did an awful lot here, but that's effectively going to be our function called add item here that will pick up the item. Well, actually, this is just going to be the function that is called from the pickup script to add item to the player inventory. And this is, again, in our UI player inventory manager script here. So this is a public function so that it's accessible outside the script component by, or can be called by other scripts when it gets a reference to the script component that's on here. And so yeah, that's our first function. So in the next series, we'll continue and pick up where we left off here. We'll actually utilize this add item function, and we'll check it to make sure it works. The way we're going to check it, because we don't actually have the code written right now to, like if you bring up the inventory screen, it's just blank. We don't have anything that actually loads the sprite up into those boxes so that we can see what items loaded in what array. We're going to work on that next time, but the quick way that we can check it once we build our pickup code is we can put a watch in Visual Studio here on the array, and we can see when items are added to it, and we can check the values of this array in real time as it's running. Our player inventory right here, this inventory array right here. We'll be able to check this and check the values in real time on what's being added to it. So as long as we know it's adding correctly to this array, then we know when we start writing our code that will display the items in the player inventory screen from this array, we'll know, we're getting correct information. So we want to make sure the information is stored correctly before we start even worrying about showing stuff, because we could be showing the wrong items if we're putting in the wrong slots, or getting categories wrong or item names wrong, that kind of thing. Our inventory could get all messed up. So we need to make sure the data is being stored properly. And so that's what we'll work on next time, testing that, writing the pickup code, and testing to make sure things are correct in our player inventory array before we move forward. So thanks again. Again, I'm keeping these short, and I'll definitely do another stream later. I've got a call to make. I'll grab some lunch, get that going, and we'll get on a little bit later this afternoon, because I'm going to definitely be working on this all day today. Usually Saturdays I tend to work on this more than during the week. So, but I think we can make some real progress. My goal for today is to actually get this inventory system working to the point where we're picking up items, we're storing in the array, we're able to hit I for inventory to see what's in the inventory, and get all that part working, and then also work on being able to drag and drop items around in the inventory. That would be the next thing. I'd love to complete that today if possible, but that's going to be later this evening, more likely if we do the drag and drop portion. So today we'll probably have um, three stream sessions today, this being the first, and we'll do 2 more sessions throughout the day. So check back, and I may do more. It just depends on how I'm feeling, how things are rolling with the code. Right now we're doing a lot of code-based stuff, so as long as it's rolling the way it needs to, I'll keep progressing. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Please check us out soon on the next stream. Make sure you follow and subscribe on YouTube if you want to. I do have a Twitch channel, but I'm not currently streaming this to that. But when I get to that point where I'm using Restream.io to push out to all these streaming sites, I'll start mentioning that more often. But right now, it's strictly on YouTube. So I hope you enjoyed this series and learned a little bit about what we're doing here or trying to accomplish, and hopefully you understood the basic code here. I try to keep it as simple as possible and document where I think it's necessary, like down here where I documented the slots, so and some other items. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you soon.